Hey guys, welcome back to Medusa readings. The front door is open. I am next to a busy street. You may hear some noise. We're going to continue, and you know what? I'm going to turn on my ring so I can see a little better. Okay, because it's going to get dark in a minute here. Yesterday we started the Fibonacci. And I worked through the basis of that. I demonstrated for you the sound of each fork in the sequence. And we went through an explanation of all of that with the ratio of thirds, which is the basis of Dr. Boulow's work, but also the basis of Dr. Stone's work, who Dr. Boulow studied with polarity therapy. So we're going to get into the actual breakdowns of the different relationships of each fork and what they do and why it's so important. This is water. Cheers. What should we start with? Let's start with a favorite to Dr. Boulow, Auto 128. Essentially, it's the frequency of life. Auto, once again, meaning osteophonic. There are body tuners. There are osteophonic tuners, which have weights at the top of the tines, which force the vibration back down through the handle. And then what you do is you place the handle on various parts of your body. So it becomes like a theragun. All right, so here we go. I think this is 12 in the series. Universal energy field, or 0 point. Excuse me. The series begins with 0, which represents nothing or energy without form. 0 is the unknowable before the universal energy field, which is the source of everything, and yet is nothing. 0 is the center of the spiral. Keep in mind, kind of the universal symbol of the Fibonacci is the nautilus shell. Or you can think of the way a succulent cactus grows, or a rose bud opens up. That's what we're doing with. So 0 point, we're in the center. Zero is the center of the spiral. It's the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega. In the healing arts, 0 is a still point, which functions as a conduit for the universal energy field. 1-1. Also known as C, 256 hertz, middle C. The next step is 1-1, which is the fundamental, or the beginning. 1-1 is not an interval because it is 1 and cannot be divided further. 1-1 represents the universal energy field arising from the no-thingness of 0. 1-1 represents the universal energy field arising from the nothingness of 0. Dr. Bolo is a religious man, and so he quotes the Bible often. And here he has a biblical quote from John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Here's 1-1, C256, which is part of the solar harmonic spectrum. One, two. The first interval is 1-2, which sounds the octave. The ancient Greeks called the octave diapason, which means through all possibilities, or the space for everything. In terms of the ascent of consciousness, 1-2 represents the space between the whole cranium. When tuning forks are sounded, they resonate within the cranium the way a Gregorian chant resonates in a church. So this is G, 385, part of the solar harmonic spectrum. If you watch my earlier videos where I was talking about the solar harmonics, you know that I talked about the perfect fifth, which was the C and the G, basing from the C, which is middle C on the piano, and then the G, those steps above it. These two together create the perfect fifth. In the Fibonacci, it is 1-1 and 1-2. Same frequency, same tones, just a different designation system. That which activates zinc oxide release. The next interval is 2-3. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Okay. I misspoke. Ignore what I just said. The fork I just showed you was another C. It is the next fork that is the G that creates the perfect fifth, and that is the 3-2. I'm sorry about that. That is G, 384. My apologies. So we have 1-1, which is middle C. Then we have 1-2, which is 1C up from middle C. Then we move to G. 2/3. Two, three balance. The next interval is 2-3, the perfect fifth, which is the ideal balance between heaven and earth. Lao Tzu wrote, 1 has produced 2, 2 has produced 3. One of his commentators explains, these words mean that 1 has been divided into yin, the female principle, and yang, the male principle. These two have been joined, and in their junction comes the harmony of the 3. The spirit of the 3, condensing, has produced all realities. So, ignore what I said before. Here is the perfect fifth, the C and the G, which back when I was doing the solar harmonic spectrum, I have these forks. They just have different designations on them because they're from a perfect set. They're still the perfect fifth. So I'll play those for you. Yes, that sounds right. When I played those two before, because I dorked out, it didn't quite sound right. That's the perfect fifth. That is the great releaser of nitric oxide. I'm going to sneeze. The interval of a fifth causes the sphenoid bone to vibrate and move in harmonic patterns. The sphenoid looks like a butterfly with its greater and lesser wings. And the pterygoid processes look like the feet of a butterfly ready to land on a flower. The sphenoid moves and rotates in different directions. If we could see the sphenoid moving, it would look like a great bird flying through the sky and navigating different wind currents. There's a picture of the sphenoid here, and if you're a massage therapist or a PT or an OT, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I don't remember. Let me look ahead. Let me grab Dr. Stone's book. I should be able to find. That doesn't mean anything to you, I know. See, this is how old this book is. He did this book when people typed on typewriters, and you can still see it. That's how it still is. The sphenoid is the bone in your skull that is like the keystone in craniosacral and lymphatic drainage. It's the muscle that basically the bone that basically connects your skull, your brain bucket, to your face. If I can find. I'll read this book to you guys next if you want, but this is going to be like a whole freaking medical massage course. Seriously. This book is a medical massage course. I don't think so. I don't think specifically. I'm going to find... Oh, wait a second. Okay. Dr. Bolu is a study of Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone is an osteopath. So here's a drawing of the skull. Frontal bone above your eyes. Parietal bone is on the side of your head. If you can see right back here behind the eye socket, there's a suture there, like the parietal bone is here. And then there's another bone here that's like right behind the eye socket. No, it's not your temporal bone. Your temporal bone's in there, but that's not it. It's your sphenoid. And it connects your skull to your face, to your jaw. If your jaw is off, it will upset the alignment of bones in your skull. Think about that. What's under your skull? Your brain, all your nerve processes. So if the bones in your skull are off, you're creating neurological problems, physiological problems, all kinds of problems. Deep tissue doesn't work, friends. There is deep tissue that works. Rolfing and structural integration and myofascial release. They work because they work with the tissue, understanding the way it is, the way it grows, the positive polarity of it, the negative polarity of it, and the way it works with other things. Deep tissue that involves sticking an elbow in your back or a thumb anywhere in your body doesn't work. The people that do that don't know what they're doing. Stop paying them. There are people, I'm not the only one, who have spent a great deal of time and money learning how to do medical body work properly to help you. If you like deep tissue, then I challenge you this. Ask your therapist to tell you what school of deep tissue they practice. When people have said to me, what kind of deep tissue do you do? I tell them structural integration and myofascial release and neuromuscular therapy. And they either know what those things are and they go, oh great, I'm a structural integration person. Great, that's the work I can do. Or they go, well, I just like it deep. So you don't know what structural integration or myofascial release or neuromuscular therapy are? No, I just like it deep. Oh, so you don't know either. You don't really want work done. Deep tissue of sticking your elbow in somebody's back or having them stick a thumb in a place That's like, oh, my head hurts, so I'm going to bang a hammer on my foot. So my nervous system is distracted by the fact that I'm banging a hammer on my foot, and I don't feel the pain in my head. That's what this stuff is. That's what this stuff is. It's useless, it's distraction, and honestly, you'd be better off going to Walgreens and buying some Biofreeze or putting some ice on a painful spot than paying an idiot who has not taken the time to learn how to do their work. Cheers. Okay, where are we? So we were talking about the sphenoid, a very important bone in your skull. That your brain is up here, your face is down here. The superior center of the sphenoid bone is called the sella turcica, which means Turkish saddle. The sella turcica is located in the center of the forehead, just above the eyes, and is oftentimes referred to in consciousness literature as the seat of the third eye. The sella turcica has 4 posts in which the diaphragm sella is attached. The diaphragm sella is stretched between posts like a finely tuned drum head and is very sensitive to vibration. The pituitary gland sits on top of the sella turcica. That's pretty important. When the vibrations of the perfect fifth stimulate sphenoid movements, the diaphragm sella resonates in harmony. The bone starts resonating with the tone. Simultaneously, the pituitary gland releases endogenous opiates, which are the precursors of the release of nitric oxide. The opiates free consciousness from being concerned with the body and daily activities by its sedating effect, leading us to greater feelings of well-being. The nitric oxide release catalyzes the body to heal, detoxify, and in general, take care of itself. This allows our conscious awareness to move to higher states. How is this accomplished? This is accomplished 2 ways. It's accomplished with the perfect fifth, which has no contact at all, and it's accomplished with cranial sacral therapy, which is executed with the weight of a nickel. And waiting and listening and hearing the different pulses and responding to them. Yes, all of that is accomplished with no contact at all or the weight of a nickel. The pituitary gland and the diaphragm sella can be symbolized by the archetypal image of Aladdin flying on his magic carpet. So if the sella turcica is the carpet, and the pituitary gland sits on top of the sella turcica, the pituitary gland is Aladdin, and the sella turcica is the carpet. When we are in optimal health and well-being, the sphenoid is like a magic carpet with wings that guide effortlessly through the energy currents of life into the higher realms of consciousness. The pituitary gland, at the center of the sphenoid, sits in a highly balanced still point vortex. Dr. Randolph Stone writes about obtaining the state of balance in his Advanced Polarity Therapy notes. Here's Dr. Stone's words. When the mind is stilled here, it's called Ra, or the sanctuary of rest by being still. Here is the tabernacle of God in man as his mountain of inspiration and revelation from higher regions. All saints, saviors, and prophets have used this highway to spiritual reasons. This is the sanctuary and magic mirror where higher creations can be seen and traveled on a sound current. The center was also mentioned in Arabian Nights as Aladdin's lamp, found by great effort and many trials. Next sequence is 3-5. Did I grab the right one? Yes. And this is the space of dreams. The Ba, a form of spirit, is represented by a jabiru bird, which leaves the body during dreams and death. And that is a translation of an Egyptian codex. The next interval in the Fibonacci series is 3-5, which is the interval of a sixth. The 3-5 interval is the beginning of ascent into higher spiritual levels. It can be visualized in many ways. The psychic, Edgar Cayce, called in the interval of the mystic fire. Its archetype is the first step of Alice into the rabbit hole, on the way to Wonderland. The alchemists know it is the interval of ascension and visualized it as an image of a phoenix rising. When our consciousness is located in the Sella Turcica and optimal sphenoid balance is obtained, our life energy simultaneously lifts us within a vortex of energy into the third ventricle of the brain. The third ventricle of the brain is known in Sanskrit as the cave of Brahma. Yeah, this stuff is long known. And the medical profession wants to make sure you don't know anything about this. So you do what they tell you and you buy their stupid drugs. The cave of Brahma is a place in which we're located at the seat of resonance with the ocean of cosmic vibrations. The archetype of the ascent of consciousness into the third ventricle is seen as the image of an unicorn spreading its wings. The unicorn's wings symbolized a balanced sphenoid, and its horn represents the third eye. The unicorn lifts up in its journey across the rainbow bridge through many realities in order to reach the pot of gold. The alchemists symbolized the pot of gold as the philosopher's stone. Today, we call it the universal energy field. When our consciousness enters the third ventricle of the brain, anandamide molecules are released. The appearance of these molecules signifies that our consciousness has left normal reality and has entered a dream state. Many American Indian tribes referred to the third ventricle as the dream lodge, where their ancestors sit in council and advise them on alternate pathways of vision. If you've been in a sweat lodge, you've been there. If you were in a sweat lodge that was actually legit. I have a Lakota friend about an hour from here that allows me to lodge with him, and I have definitely gone to this place. Psychics and seers call the third ventricle the region of 1,000 lights that intertwine to create dreams within dreams. And this is the A. So the first 4 of the Fibonacci line up to the first 4 of the solar harmonic spectrum, and then the sequences after this one, after the A, don't correspond to anything. So anyway, so here's the A. Dreams. 5-8 is Cave of Whispers. When our consciousness continues to rise, it moves us further into the cave of Brahma, the third ventricle of the brain that we were just talking about. The 1,000 lights are still available. However, we are drawn to inner voices as we let go of our thoughts and are no longer necessary. The inner voices are known as the 1,000 whispers of Brahma. It's here we discover our inner voice, our voice of wisdom, inner guidance, and the healer within. The information we need to obtain a sense of balance and peace by taking correct action, which becomes available to us. When we listen to our inner voice, the vibration of wisdom resonates throughout the cave of Brahma. This, in turn, vibrates the diaphragm stela and oscillates the pituitary gland on its anterior and posterior lobes. So remember that Dr. John is a doctor. He's a neurologist. He talks in doctor talk. We're still talking about the sphenoid bone and the pituitary sitting on top of it like Aladdin riding his carpet. Concurrently, the sphenoid bone resonates and moves into a new pattern. So the sphenoid responds. The sphenoid responds to all of these tuning forks. It's just that when you create a perfect fifth with the C and the G, the sphenoid goes into still point. It goes into exhale mode. All of these stimulated in different ways. The temporal bones glide into a new receiving position, making the bones available for input from reality. While our consciousness is in the cave of Brahma, the third ventricle of the brain, it is surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid. That's like the lymph that is between the tissues in your brain and around and between the tissues of your spine and your hips. Alchemically, cerebral spinal fluid is mercurial in nature and called the dew from heaven, divine water, the fountain of youth, or quicksilver. Anatomically, it is transparent, slightly yellowish, consisting of saline or saltwater liquid. It's secreted in the third ventricle of the choroid plexus. Again, Dr. John is a neurologist. And is located on the walls of the ventricle. They drip cerebral spinal fluid into the ventricle the same way that moisture collects in a cave. When we listen to our voice of wisdom, the 3-5, the cerebral spinal fluid is simultaneously encoded with the vibrational essence of the dialogue. Many healing arts practitioners who work with cerebral spinal fluid, that's what therapists who do craniosacral, lymphatic drainage, and myofascial techniques use. We work with cerebral spinal fluid. Many healing practitioners who work with cerebral spinal fluid talk about their experiences with the intelligence of this fluid. Yes, its magnetic power is remarkable. Dr. Andrew Still, doctor of osteopathy, the founder of osteopathic medicine, said, "Cerebral spinal fluid is the highest known element in the human body. He who is able to reason will see that this great river of life must be tapped and the withering field irrigated at once, or the harvest of health is forever lost." Andrew Still, Dr. Andrew Still is a remarkable person. If you're the least bit interested in any of this, please take a few Google minutes to look up Dr. Andrew Still. The cerebral spinal fluid carries within it the essence of our inner wisdom and communicates this to the rest of our body. It flows out of the third ventricle, down the cerebral aqueduct, and into the fourth ventricle. The fourth ventricle represents the transition from superconsciousness into somatic consciousness. So we're transitioning, the fourth ventricle represents that place where you move from spirit and ether into the soma, the body. Energetically, the Egyptians called it the Ankh, where energy makes its way from the divine into normal reality. From the fourth ventricle, the cerebral spinal fluid spirals down through the central cavity of the spinal cord, where it energetically encodes each chakra with its role in the wisdom teaching. The cerebral spinal fluid is stored in a reservoir at the base of the sacrum, where it is known as the sleeping Kundalini force. So when you sit in a chair all day, like I'm sitting in a chair now, but I usually sit on the floor, you are jamming up all that stored cerebral spinal fluid in your sacrum. Chairs are bad. The Kundalini is sleeping because it is encoded with wisdom that has not been acted upon. It's dormant. It is potential that needs a spark to set it in motion. The spark can be something in our life, either positive or negative, which brings us to the motivation to act. When the Kundalini awakens, it rises with intense struggle each step of the way. The elemental energy of the chakras is manifested and balanced again and again until normal reality resonates with a message of wisdom voices. 3-5. And you'll remember from yesterday, the spaces between these are so close. But if you're really paying attention, every fork that I activate, you'll feel it in a different part of your skull. Even through my crappy phone, you'll feel the difference. 8:13. Mystical passageway. For our consciousness to rise higher, it must pass through the mystical passageway, which is known as the Hidden Mountain Pass, the Crystal Door, or the Magic Mirror. Yeah. The mystical passageway is located at the posterior superior, so that means back. Posterior's back. Back ears. Back. Superior's on top. So the back and the top portion of the third ventricle, directly below the pineal gland. And you know where the pineal gland is, right? It's right there. Discovering and passing through the mystical passageway takes us beyond the voices of wisdom and closer to their source. Discovering and passing through the mystical passageway requires you to honor the voices of wisdom. The process of honoring is one of acting on the encoding wisdom messages stored in the sacrum, or sacred bone. Get out of your chair, roll around on the floor, and exercise. You don't have to go to the gym to exercise. Roll around on the floor, move your hips, move your legs on one side and then the other. Activate that sacrum. Activate all the bones in your hips. Your hip is not one bone, it's several joints. Activate them all. A fundamental principle of alchemy found in the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, and as above, so below. I have that book. Let me see if I can grab it really quick. The source of the words and the image, as above, so below. The Emerald Tablets of Hermes, also known as Thoth. As above, so below, is illustrated by the Merkaba. As above, so below means the spiritual reality above must be in resonance with the normal reality below. The same principle is found in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. When normal reality is not congruent with spiritual reality, a state of life dissonance results. Revolving life dissonances means that we must go to work to bring our normal reality back into vision. The act of doing the work in order to come into alignment with the wisdom voices is to manifest our vision. The work creates an inner heat, which is known by many names. Tumo, the sacred fire, the fire of Shiva, the alchemic furnace. True inner heat is a heat that warms the cerebral spinal fluid through the whole body, and specifically in the third ventricle, where it becomes a warm mist of cerebral spinal fluid that rises up and through the mystical passageway. So, 8:13. Try closing your eyes and just allowing the sound to come in to your cells without thinking about what the numbers mean. Screw the numbers, screw the words. They have the experience. But the differences between these forks are so close. But you will feel it in a different part of your brain. The Great Divide, 1321. Anatomically, our consciousness comes to a soft tissue seat, much like the sella turcica that supports the auditory and visual coccygeae. These are small mounds of specialized brain tissue that receive visual and auditory energy signals from our normal reality through our eyes and ears, where it is then directed to other parts of the brain. It's information that is normally interpreted in the fabric of everyday reality. The center point of the crisscrossing auditory and visual data is directly below the pineal gland. Flowing between the soft tissue seat of the auditory and visual coccygeae is a river of cerebral spinal fluid, which connects the right and left hemispheres of the brain. In order to cross the river of cerebral spinal fluid, we must be in perfect balance. Virgo is the astrological archetype for the state of perfect balance necessary to ascend to higher states of consciousness. Virgo is the astrological sign for perfection, which is both ruled and exalted by Mercury. In the alchemical drawing below, the feet of Mercury stand in perfect balance, Virgo, on the wings of the sphenoid. Mercury standing on the sphenoid, balanced. The body of Mercury represents the third ventricle, and the two fighting figures represent the lateral ventricles and the struggle necessary to raise the Kundalini. Mercury holds a staff of caduceus in each hand, which represents the mercurial principle. Simultaneously, Mercury spreads new wings, which represent the seat of balance, located at the soft tissue seat of the auditory and visual colliculi. He's a doctor, guys. The crown represents the pineal gland and the three principles of wave, pulse, and form, which are also portrayed as the sun, moon, and the symbol of Mercury on top of the center of the crown. The Mercury symbol represents the exaltation of Mercury in Virgo. It's the key, the passageway to the universal energy field, or what the alchemists call the philosopher's stone. When we're in perfect balance with heaven and earth, the waters part and we ascend. This is the archetype of Moses parting the waters in order for the Jews to reach the promised land. If something is out of balance, or when the message of the wisdom teachings is not being acted upon, our consciousness can fall into a river of cerebral spinal fluid. We must return to normal reality to do more work. However, when perfect balance is obtained, consciousness sits in deep, reverent stillness within the cathedral of the cranium. Your cranium is your brain bucket. Your jaw is not your cranium. Your cranium is your brain bucket. I'll start that over. When perfect balance is obtained, consciousness sits in deep, reverent stillness within the cathedral of the cranium and before the temple of heaven, waiting to hear the pineal gland, or the eye, of God. The German earth scientist and naturalist Victor Schauberger gives an insight into how this happens. He visited the salmon streams of Washington State in the 1930s to investigate how salmon were able to swim upstream against a strong current. He was especially interested in how they were able to negotiate waterfalls. Schauberger discovered that water coming over the falls created natural spirals, much like water going down a drain. The merging of these spirals created water cyclones. The salmon struggle against the current to come to a place of perfect balance within the water. And just at the right moment, they are pulled up over the waterfall within the vortex of the spirals. Schauberger believed that the energy within the vortex levitated the salmon to the top of the waterfalls. In a similar way, we come to an optimal state of balance between heaven and earth. Our consciousness is lifted into higher realms across what seems like an impossible leap within a vortex of stillness. So this is that. This is 1321, the Great Divide. Have one more fork, and that will be the end for tonight. 2134, the Eye of God. The pineal gland is named from the Latin pinus, which means pine cone. It is unique because it sits alone in the upper center of the brain, just above the third ventricle. Every site in our brain has a left and right counterpart. 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, except for the pineal gland. The pineal gland becomes visible in the developing fetus at 7 weeks, which is exactly the time male or female gender can be seen. It develops from specialized tissues in the roof of the mouth and migrates through the third ventricle to the center of the brain. Here it's surrounded by our limbic brain, which consists of structures involved in the experience of emotion, such as joy, rage, fear, anxiety, and pleasure. As an archetype, the pineal functions by overseeing and integrating all the realms of dualities. When the consciousness enters the pineal gland, it transcends duality and travels on the great dream highway to the higher realms of energy and spiritual realities. It is here that great truths are instantly understood, and the vibratory nature of reality is revealed. The higher spiritual reason behind a question, thought, or challenge, which began in a normal reality, is illuminated, and we know with crystal clarity all the connections from above to below. When the waters part and our consciousness crosses the Great Divide, the pineal gland releases a molecule called melatonin. Melatonin is a tryptophan molecule, and it's the family of molecules associated with psychedelics. It serves as an antioxidant as well as a regulator of our body's time clock. It's very effective in cases of jet lag and in helping you to sleep on a more regular schedule. In many ways, melatonin serves a similar purpose as the release of opiates by the pituitary, which is to create a state of calmness, allowing our consciousness to ascend into the mysteries of the pineal gland. When our consciousness ascends, the pineal gland vibrates like a tuning fork. When our consciousness ascends, the pineal gland vibrates like a tuning fork. It's believed that the vibrating pineal gland secretes endogenous molecules similar to ayahuasca, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, all of which are from the tryptamine family. The best known of the tryptamine molecules are LSD, psilocybin, which is an active ingredient in magic mushrooms, and DMT, which is an active ingredient in ayahuasca, which is used by shamans in South America. Mystics talk about experiencing a whirring sound associated with pineal gland as they enter into higher states of consciousness. Many people who have had a clear near-death experience report a similar whirring sound preceding a tunnel of light. The sound resonates through our cranial cavity in much the same way as an orchestra resonates in a concert hall. When we leave still point within our pineal gland, our consciousness vibrates with a spiritual sound. We enter into a spiritual journey and are guided by a higher intelligence to experience what we need to learn. While our consciousness is traveling the Rainbow Bridge, the vibrations of our experience are resonating throughout our cranium. The pineal gland then becomes like a tuning fork, sympathetically vibrating the stream of cerebral spinal fluid and sending spiritual potentized water, called dew from heaven, through our cerebral spinal fluid network. Simultaneously, our cranial bones are oscillating in new patterns, and our visual and auditory nerves, via our auditory and visual colliculi, are seeing and hearing a new spiritual reality. That was a whole mouthful of stuff. Dr. Bolu is a doctor, and he talks like one. Dr. Stone's a little easier to understand. I think Dr. Bolu's a classically trained musician, and I think that has something to do with, something to do with that. He's so evolved in that way. He's so higher dimensional through his classical training. So here is that last step. Here's that last step. The eye of God. The interval of 2134. All right. So that's that. That's a lot. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about overtones. We're going to talk a little bit more about autos, about the angel tuner sequence, how those work and how those differ. Okay. Human tuning. The Emerald Tablets of Hermes, or the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, same guy. Polarity Therapy by Dr. Stone, one of the Bibles of anybody who does any kind of myofascial work. This book is a Bible. So thank you. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you tomorrow.